Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Bethel Backstage. I'm Pastor Steve, and we have a very special edition of Bethel Backstage. This is Mother's Day, and we love our moms, and we love moms. And the whole idea of being a mom and mothering is ordained by God and truly is one of the best examples of God's common grace to humanity. Praise God for mothers. And so to every mom out there, happy Mother's Day. This edition of Bethel Backstage is going to be on the subject of moms and how to be a better mom. And one of the principles in the New Testament is that those who are a little further along the path, I jokingly have called them seasoned mothers, could share their wisdom with those that are a little earlier in the path of mothering, and to get some tips and some best practices. And so we have here 3 seasoned mothers, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves along with how many children they have and grandchildren. Okay, so Cheryl.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Kuiper. I go to the Cedar Lake campus. I have 3 adult children and 11 grandkids.
My name is Carol Erdy, and I go to Hope Portage, and I have 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren.
Hi, my name is Nancy Satterlow. I have 3 Silas who brought us 3 daughters, so now we call it 6 grown-up kids and 11 grandkids.
So we have quite a collective pool of wisdom here represented, and we want to suck all the wisdom out of this that we can. And I thought that it'd be fun to just start with like a favorite mothering memory. Like what's a fond maybe moment or occasion in your mothering?
Well, I wasn't going to talk about something necessarily so fun. In fact, I thought this question was kind of hard to answer because being up here in front of a bunch of people, you want your life to look so together, and you want to say something wonderful that's going to make you look that way, and it's like not always that way. So I would say one of my favorite memories and most useful memories in motherhood was the day that it finally came to me via the Holy Spirit. I'm sure that change was really important, and it was something that I actually could do and should do, and I shouldn't be so resistant to change. That life was nothing but a bunch of change, especially with a bunch of kids at your house and helping them grow up through different ages and stages. So it was a good memory in my mothering because it made the rest of my life much more joyful. To realize that change was a good thing. It was a God thing, it was a good thing, and I could either embrace it or I could kick against it. So I chose to embrace it.
Wow. Great. Carol?
Well, I chose a memory. I actually talked to my kids about this because I wanted to get their take on what their favorite memory was growing up in our home. And one of the things that they brought to my memory was our family vacations, because we didn't have a lot of money, and my husband was one of those kind of guys who, whenever we needed to go anywhere big, he would go out and work a side job with a friend of his and build a deck, or we have mom and stay or whatever. And so we take our kids, load off the backseat of our car, and take them to Minnesota for a family vacation. On the way there, they were always misbehaving, so he would always say, "And honey, reach back there and smack those kids." And so, of course, we managed to get to Lake Vermilion and go fishing. And on the way there one year, we had this little tiny camper that we dragged behind our car and actually cut loose from the car. And as we were looking out the window, the camper was following us on the side of the car. So that was our favorite vacation type memories.
Well, that's a tough one to follow, Dan.
So true.
What do you say?
So true. That when you brought up family vacations, those are always amazing memories. Always amazing. One of the fun things that I had throughout my kids' growing up years was that the 3 of them were each other's best cheerleaders. they were always competing at something, not necessarily against each other, but when they were in school, especially when they hit middle school, and then it was basketball, or it was baseball, and it was, whatever it is that they did. And then they were always at each other's events. And even if it was track and they had to run around and root from over here, and then yell from over here, and then yell for them to finish, you can do it. They did that all through their growing up, and they did that through college, and they're doing it now. And they are there, each other's. They are still, we used to tell them that, your friends will be your friends, but they will move through your lives, but your brother's your brother forever. And they still do that, and they still root for each other. And it's a joyful thing for me.
Well, we may need to get some tips on how to cultivate that in those children. That sounds great. Okay, so this is, as I said in the introduction, we're kind of wanting the seasoned mothers to provide wisdom for the perhaps less seasoned. And so if you could give some wise counsel to a younger version of yourself, like if you go back and say, Cheryl in this case, chill out or whatever it would be, what advice would you give the younger you?
Well, I always found that the busyness of life just takes you away. It just pulls you from every direction. And so I would say to my younger self, if you do not have time every day to spend with the Lord and to spend in His Word, you are just way too busy. So I would encourage myself to make that a priority every day.
I think a while back, as you know, talking about winter season, I spoke at a shower for my granddaughter-in-law, and I remember the song from Delano, where he says, "And sunrise, sunset, swiftly flung the years." And I thought, at that time, my great-granddaughter had not been born yet, and now she's 2. And I like to remind my grandchildren who are raising their children that it's going to go quick. I can think back, and it seems like yesterday I was 20, and I look at my life and I think, thank you, Lord, for the years that you gave me and for the children that I have to remind that knowledge goes quickly and it's a vapor, and then it soon passes. And that's the advice I'd like to give these women who are the ladies in our church are amazing with babies, but it's so quick. And all of a sudden, they're in school, then they're graduating, and then they're gone.
I got advice early on that the days are long, the years are short. And it's a similar principle that, and I find even with my daughters, they'll be snuggling me or something. I'll get looking at their shin, and it's like so long. Like, how did this shin get so long so quickly? And you just realize that they're just elongating, they're growing, and you blink, and then they're taller, and all that. It's sad to me how fast it all goes. Yeah,
That's a common theme, isn't it? It's like don't miss it. To my younger self, though, that's basically what I would say. I would say stop picking up the Legos twice a day, just let it before, and kick them under the bed at night. But then you have more time to build Legos with them and not have to pick them up so often. Because you want to be there. You want to just be in the moment with them. You want to not miss it, not miss anything that they're doing or saying or going through. So it's a time thing. It's definitely. I remember when Kyle hit high school, I thought, we have 4 years. That's great. That's a long time. Next minute, he was in college. And then he was gone, because after college, life kind of changes for those guys because they get more independent and they're still kids, but so don't miss it.
Okay, I'm going to sit on this just for a second because I think a lot of younger moms hear people say that and they're like, I know that this is going to go fast. But how do I practically savor the moment that you're encouraging? You mentioned maybe being, kicking the Legos or letting them lay there. that's perhaps a practical suggestion that the OCD mothers might benefit from a little bit. But do you have any other, if as you look back, like I was too much this way, I should have been more that way, or like any. And how do you slow down time, or better said, how do you make the most of the time as a mom?
I think the one thing that I learned, perhaps the hard way, was an understanding in my kitchen many, many years ago, and my kids are still little, and I thought, all I'm doing is washing dishes. And what does this count for? And it's as if the Lord reminded me that this counts for glory, because everything I do can count for glory. I love R.C. Sproul, who said, break now counts forever. And whenever I'm talking to my granddaughters, I try to remind them of that. It's not like we're looking for the big things, because basically life is a monotonous march of time, and nothing major really usually ever really happens. But it counts in the Lord's economy. And I think I would like myself and the younger women to remember that what they're doing has value and has purpose, because God has purpose.
That's good. What was that R.C. Sproul quote again, just in case somebody's trying to write this down?
Right now counts forever.
That's great. Any other tip?
I would just say being intentional about it. And so many of us didn't know when we were younger moms what was expected of us, what it would be like. So communicating with other women about what happened in their life, what to expect in their life. How many new moms do you know that say, nobody ever told me it was going to be like this? So I think just being intentional and, seeking other women so that you can make that time count.
Okay, I'm going to freelance a little bit more on this point that you just made, because you said, nobody ever told me it was going to be like this. Do you think that there is, maybe amongst younger women before they become a mom, kind of over-romanticized view of what motherhood would be like? And then when it is what it is, there is kind of this either disillusionment or a period of disillusionment or disappointment, because it's harder, it's more earthy, it's food in one, stuff out the other, and so how could we prepare moms, do you think, better or in a more realistic way, so that they don't find themselves saying, nobody ever told me it was going to be this way? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know if, I think you have to do most of it. You have to jump in and do it yourself most of the time. I don't know that people can really tell you how to do it. It's kind of like learning how to be a teacher. They could tell you all about it, but until you step in a classroom with 30 kids, you don't know what you're doing. I remember taking Kyle home from the hospital, and I remember that verse in Deuteronomy. Is it Deuteronomy 30, 31, 30?
We'll hold you accountable to this.
Thank you so much. It's not coming away. But it says, be strong and courageous, and right on it. Yeah, okay, strong and courageous. And right after that, it says, do not be terrified of them. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's 8 pounds, and I'm terrified. What if I screw up? And I think what you need is encouragement around you. I think you need other moms, like Cheryl said, to encourage you, and not to necessarily say, oh, I went through that and here's how I did it, but to say it's okay. It's the season that you are. It's where God has you right now. And just trust He is going to show you how to get there. Let me tell you some tips, or let me give you some support, even from my mom and my aunts. Getting that support, it will be okay. He will stop crying one day. Just all of that support, I think, really helps. So new moms need some encouragement even more than they need a new pack of diapers. So it helps.
The pack of diapers are always appreciated.
Most definitely, because they're a little pricey at this point in time.
Yeah.
I think to speak through the way you phrased that question, is it overly romanticized? I wouldn't say in many cases it is, because, and it does sort of answer that last question that we'll look at about discouragement, but I think that we look for models, we look for perfect models, we look for ourselves to be perfect at what we're doing. And when it doesn't turn out that way, it's like, what went wrong? I love watching my granddaughters again and my daughters-in-law as well when they're dealing with their children, because it's an example to the whole family of how it works. It's chaotic. It gets busy. The kids do crazy things. But at the end of the day, when you put them down, there's that joy that I think comes from there. And every day, like you said, builds on the last day for sure. Until you finally at that place where you can look back and think, well, nothing as bad as I thought it was. And you think, I think they just need to have the freedom to be asked questions and to ask questions. And what I mean by that is for them to say, have people say to them, how are you feeling about being a mother? What makes you afraid of being a mother? What are you looking forward to? But just getting them thinking about those things and having other women to come alongside them and to talk about the realities, not the hoary-gory yuck and all that in such a way.
Sometimes it is fun to tell those stories too.
I should have made that one of the questions. Yeah. What is the grossest moment of your motherhood?
I could probably get that one the best.
No, but I think all in all, I think just, having this Titus 2 model is
Practiced in our churches, practice in our Bible study groups, so that women know it's okay to ask.
And, just to put a plug in a moment, I think a lot of moms, and I think about our church, there are many, many, many couples that are in our congregation, and, they don't have any family around. You sort of have maybe in your mind the Waltons or something where, everyone's growing up on Walton's Mountain, and there's Ma and Grandma and everybody's all around. But in modern society, I wouldn't know the percentage off the top of my head, but I'd say it's a really high percentage of people that don't live in proximity to some of the support structures of, moms and grandmas and cousins and whatever. So this to me is an example of how the church can be a place where women can truly find support, relationships, community, and resources, both in knowledge but also in experience. But that requires that mom to, take some steps into ministries that the church offers that could provide that. And so that always entails a little bit of a faith step to, show up at the event or go to the organizational meeting or whatever it might be. And but in the end, it's worth it, because the better the mom, Lord willing, the better the experience the child will have. And in the end, the discipleship of that child is what we're really aiming for, is to see that child grow up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. And emotionally healthy moms, spiritually healthy moms, are more effective at that than those that are, in an unhealthy place. So the church, I think, has a incredible opportunity to provide the kind of resources that you're talking about. Okay, so we're going to move on here. This is a similar question. Okay, similar, so there's overlap here. But you all are decades into your mothering experience. And I'd like to ask if you could go back, do it all again. What are a thing or two that you would intentionally do differently?
This is going to sound really bad, and I'm really sorry. I would not be a screamer. Sometimes my fiery...
Could you tone that down, please?
Certainly, sorry. I will speak more quietly. Sometimes my temper...
It just gets away. It just, sometimes we get away. Like, we contour this. There was one time when things were when they're little and they're all little and they're running around and they're just kind of crazy because you're trying to do blah, 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 and it's like, okay, so I would tell myself at that point to take a breath and go sit down instead of opening the cupboard doors and throwing every Tupperware piece I had in there over my shoulder and across the kitchen. That would be my temper. Not anymore. is greatly calmed down. But I would tell myself, I would stop being a screamer sooner than I did, because when you realize you're doing something like that, then you need to quit that. My children have heard apologies from me, which I am not at all shy about speaking of, because they needed to. They needed to hear, Mommy is so sorry. It was not you I was angry at. It was me I was angry at. But that's something that I would definitely work on.
So less screaming, more apologizing.
Less screaming, more being there, Mommy, and loving them. Dealing with that temper of mine in a different way.
What's one tip for how you have moderated that?
Walking away from the situation for a moment and it still maybe my fist are clenched, but saying, dear Lord, I need some help and I need it like right now. Taking a breath or two and then realizing that those are my gifts. He gave those gifts to me and entrusted them to me and Ray, and they are my little people to help grow up for a time, because they become with their own big people, with their own little people. So then it just, that would hit me, and I would think they're precious little people, and they need to know that I love them. Even if I get mad, I need to tell them I'm sorry for getting so angry. But again, it's not you that I'm really angry with. It's really me that I can't control this situation. So it's letting go of that. And that's why I did it. Just walked away. Or told them, you guys go over here, I'll go over here. And then we come back together. And then when their dad got home, he is so cool. He just doesn't get angry. I have to make him get it now. I don't do that anymore either. But he just is so cool and so thoughtful. And I'm like the opposite sometimes. So I pray about it. I just ask Jesus.
Well, if my kids were listening to this, they would probably shout a chorus of amens to everything you said. But when I thought about this question, and my human nature being what it is, how would I do things differently? I might not do things differently, but I might do them in a different way. We were raised in a period of time in our church where there was a lot of legalism. My kids were involved in all that were involved with that, and it did affect the way we raised our children, because it was picture perfect or not good enough. And so there was that screaming. There were those times when the kids knew it was all about appearance rather than life and heart. And if I could do that over differently, I would not present God as the God of legalism, because when we do that, he becomes only their judge. And if their hair isn't right, if the way they walk or talk or what they're doing isn't right, it does affect the outcome of their spiritual walk. I would invest more time in my marriage. I would invest more time in the kind of love that you just spoke about as time on in my marriage.
Wise words. Sure.
Well, I think if I had to do it all over again, I would not be so fiercely independent. It's my nature, my human nature, but it was also part of my job as a nurse to be very independent and, such a problem solver. But after a while, I began to realize that it was not really pleasing to God on a lot of days, that he wanted me to trust him and to exemplify my trust for him, to be involved with other people, to be interactive with other people, but totally trusting him for everything. And I think that my kids picked up on that. I see that in them a lot of times, that they're just fiercely independent. They can control everything. They want to do everything themselves to a fault. And that's what I would do different.
I'm just going to pause right now. An encouragement to the moms that are listening here. we picked some of the finest in our church to be on this panel, and yet each of them acknowledged some regrets or things they would change about their past. So we had anger, and we had legalism, and we had control, and just to be encouraged with the fact that maybe these are things that are presently, part of your own sanctification, things that you got to work on. And it comes out in your mothering, and it comes out in your marriage and such, but that we're all works in progress, and that, your struggle might not be your struggle, might be your struggle, but God is working, and oftentimes I think uses the parenting experience to either expose the jagged edge that needs to be polished, or sometimes in painful ways to look in the mirror and to realize, why are these kids acting this way? Where did this come from? And you can't blame your in-laws always. It's some of it is me and you. And so, I have found parenting to be a very refining experience in the sense of exposing the idols of my own heart and how selfish I am, and in ways that, in my many years of singleness, it was all there. It just didn't have sort of the pressure cooker that parenting is to expose it in all of its ugliness. And so, but all that to say, it's the encouragement that the three of you the Lord has worked in your hearts and worked in your lives, and you're different now than you were then. And you probably would be a better mom if you could go back at this stage of maturity, spiritual maturity in particular, and do it all over again. But you wouldn't be who you are if you didn't have those experiences, and God used them to help you become the women that you are today. So praise God for that. Okay, last question here. Is there, I'm sure there will be discouraged moms that will watch this, and all moms at points, sometimes multiple times in a day, are discouraged. So what would be a word of encouragement for the discouraged mom watching this podcast?
Here's how people love you so much. They just do. You are the most important person in their life when they are growing up. They always look for mom. I was on the wrong side of the gym at a basketball game once, and Nick, who usually had double digits in points and rebounds, 2 points, so about 4 rebounds. And I see him looking all over, and I went and sat in my normal place, end of the game, 24 points, 23 rebounds, and then asked me after the game, Mom, where were you? Where were you? And I thought, oh, wrong spot. I'm sorry, buddy. I couldn't find you. I couldn't find you.
And
So they lost the game, and it was your fault.
no,
For
they
not
are
sitting in the right place in the gym.
Yeah, and this coach was pretty much yelling his name pretty loudly on a couple of those things. But no, they actually won. They did win. They ended up winning, so it wasn't my fault. Oh my, I would have felt horrible. But and I just another example. My grown up, my oldest got married, and they were moving to Minnesota, so they left on a Sunday, and we had told him goodbye at church. And 5 minutes later, he was back, and he runs in the sanctuary where we were practicing music, and he runs over to me and gives me such a hug. And he said, okay, now I can go, Mom. And he leaves, and his wife told me, oh, geez, I'm going to melt. And she calls me Mom, too. She said, Mom, he will always be home when you are around. And I thought, oh, Sarah, you're just killing me here. But they love you so much. Do not ever forget that. They find joy in being with you. And no matter what you're doing, if you're picking them up and dancing, if you're building Legos with them, if you're coloring, if you're making them a peanut butter sandwich and chopping off the edges, they love you. They will in their teens. They'll do it a little differently. They will when they're grown-ups, and again, a little differently. But they love you. And you have that spot in their heart that you always will.
That's great. All right. Sure.
So for the discouraged moms out there, you just need to know that just because you're in a period of discouragement doesn't mean you're always going to stay there. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, and it doesn't mean you're necessarily a bad mom. But I would say to you, don't go life alone. Don't go rogue, because it doesn't work very well. And I have to say that from my own experience. Again, I was hyper independent, and I just think that God programmed us. It's in our DNA to need community and communication. And so many of us think that that's something that makes us less of a person, but I don't really think it does. I think it makes us more of a person. So don't go mothering alone. Get out there and find other moms to communicate with. Choose your friends wisely. Choose godly friends, but choose them and get connected with them. If you don't know how to get connected with them, ask somebody at church, and they'll give you some good resources we have at Bethel and some means. And, I think that it really does decrease the level and the frequency of discouragement when you have that community around you.
There's a quote that I'm not getting exactly right, but sorrow experienced alone multiplies by 2. Sorrow experienced with others divides by half, and so a lot of good truth there. Carol, bring us home here, okay? Land the plane for us.
Well, let me just say that I were blowing hard on this in my thoughts, because I think that, first of all, I think it's easy to get discouraged because we have unrealistic, sometimes, expectations of who we should be. We look to the world, we look to social media, we look all over in other areas and think, well, I'm not like that, I'm not this, I'm not that. I was just thinking when you were talking about your son at the ball game. The other day, we have a pond on our property, and there's catfish on our property, and my great-grandkids came with 3 of them, and we go down, we feed the catfish, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Well, Leo said, my little great-grand, he said, "Oh, Gigi, I really wish we had a net." And I thought, oh, I have a net. So I ran home, well, not really. I fell in the golf cart, got the net, and they caught a fish. My daughter helped him, of course. We took it out and looked at it. He ran his fingers down, and he spent time looking at it and how it was bleeding and everything, and put it back in the water. And as he was running back toward the house, he said, "This has been the best day ever." Now, I mean, if I was discouraged at that point, that just lifted me to the clouds to hear that little guy. I think that one of the things that I will say as I'm landing this plane is that I want to show my greats now and my grands the beauty that God has surrounded us with. He has given us so much in just looking out at the world. And I would tell discouraged moms, grandmas, people, dads, that just spend some time acknowledging the beauty that's around us, that God has given us in the creation and in the world, and in just the joy of a little kid running away and saying, "This has been the best day ever."
Well, this has been the best podcast ever. And thank you for your wisdom and your words. And just a word to the moms here. We believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we believe that Jesus is a redeemer, and that he renews everything that he touches. And that includes motherhood. And if you are in a place where you could really use some renewal, the Church of Jesus Christ is for that very reason, and the gospel is as well. And I would encourage you to find a local church that preaches the Bible with people who are energized by spiritual gospel work. And you will find mothers like the 3 that we have here who can come alongside you and be an encouragement to you. We all need it. And so on this day, we want to say Happy Mother's Day. Thanks for listening.